I think the one thing that I've been very consistent talking about on my podcast is most people shouldn't invest in industrial real estate.
AI is requiring all this processing power, and these properties as investments are selling for crazy amounts of money.
$65 billion. Like, it's a staggering investment.
You can call it like it when you call me big data.
In January, Kentucky is going to allow medical marijuana.
Let's go!
How have you seen the cannabis industry affect the industrial real estate market?
There is blood in the streets, and a lot of people have lost big.
Come on over here, Timmy. Holy moly. I'm going to keep looking this way.
But you do those two things, you stick to it, you put your head down and you commit to doing those two things, you are unstoppable. I've invested heavily in this investment thesis on that basis. I love everything to do with industrial real estate.
Well, I got a question right off the bat. If you love industrial real estate so much, why don't you marry it?
Like, Canada's pretty restrictive. We got a lot of draconian laws. I think you guys are on the cusp of creating the best commercial real estate podcast.
Welcome to Commercially Speaking. I'm Timmy Barron, ADHD.
And I'm Bo Barron, CCIM.
And this is the podcast where Bo teaches me everything about commercial real estate, just so that I can find out as much knowledge as possible. So that I can make fun of anybody that's in commercial real estate. You see, I'm an actor and comedian, and I've got no use for any of this information other than that. You know?
Well, you're welcome.
Oh, thanks, Bo. Thanks, Bo. We've got a guest today. Also, this is very exciting because we're streaming live beyond YouTube. We've done that the past few episodes, and now we're on Facebook, LinkedIn, X, and YouTube. So this is a test drive. So anybody who's joining us on any of those platforms, let's go. We're going to be fielding questions as much as possible, but we got a guest today. Bo, tell us who we got.
Oh, we've got Chad Griffiths. And as soon as he starts speaking, you're going to understand that he is from Alabama.
Ooh, what? No,
not Alabama. He is from Alberta, Edmonton, Alberta, Canada. And he's a partner with the NAI shop up there. And I'll let him tell a little bit more about himself. But Chad and I have known of each other for, I don't know, at least a handful of years. He's done a podcast since 2020 that is specifically about industrial real estate.
Right.
But earlier this year, I went to New York City for the X Gala. Remember when I couldn't figure out if it was gala or gala?
I threw you off there because I my friends, we always called it a gala. Yeah, a nice gala.
So it's a gala.
I think it's a gala.
But I got to meet Chad in person there in New York City.
Well, hey.
And so we started talking there about maybe we can collaborate with our shows. And so, yeah, man, just thrilled to have Chad on. So, Chad, welcome to Commercially Speaking.
Yeah, baby.
Gents, it is an absolute pleasure to be here. And I got to give you guys a plug. You guys have the best up and coming podcast going right now. Between two of you, Tim and Bo, it's awesome format. I've recommended it to a ton of people. So it's an absolute honor to be here. I'm so excited.
Oh my God.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Chad.
And likewise,
so much so though that I wore my tuxedo t-shirt.
That's right.
And there's a tie-in here real quick too, if I could tell a quick story about this, because it relates to the Gala or Gala. Yeah. I'm team Gala as well, by the way.
Okay.
But Gala, it could work, but I'm team Gala. So I got invited by the GOAT, Bob Knackle, who you guys have actually interviewed.
Sure.
So I didn't know strip mall guy Don Tepman other than what we see on X. And at the time, it was mostly anonymous. So I got an invite, and I was kind of like subtly trolling Don a little bit. Like, I posted a picture saying, all right, I found my formal wear for the Gala. So I wore this t-shirt, and I'm sure he was like, who is this crazy Canadian? Is he actually going to show up in a t-shirt? Then I did another post where I actually did a Canadian tuxedo with a jean hat, jean jacket, jeans, full denim tuxedo.
Legend.
And I'm sure Don was like, I think we've made a big mistake with this guy. I thought it might be like a single purpose troll to get Don a little bit. And then I was so honored when you guys invited me to come on. I was like, this is a perfect occasion to dress up, show the Canadian way of going, being formal.
It sure is. It sure is. Every time I see a tuxedo T-shirt, it makes me think of the legend of Ricky Bobby. I don't know if you remember that scene where he's like, I picture my Jesus wearing a tuxedo T-shirt. That's like, I'm formal, but I'm also here to party.
Thank you, baby Jesus.
Yeah. Thank you, little 8 ounce, 3 pound, 8 pound, 8 ounce little baby Jesus. He was a man. He had a beard. Shut up, Chet. Not to go off in quoting that whole movie, but
yeah, I've seen it once a lot of years ago, so it's
so good.
It's lost on me, but
yeah,
it's worth a revisit.
Maybe I'll have to check it out this weekend.
It's so good. Well, Chad, it's good to see you. Good to have you here. How's Canada? Well, you know what? You grew up? You were born and raised in Canada, in Canada.
Yep.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about give us a little 5-minute origin story for those of you, for those listeners that have never met you, and for me.
Yeah. Born and raised in Edmonton, in Canada. So 44 years I've spent in the same city, and I've traveled a lot. I've traveled a lot to the U.S. Particularly, but I've always lived and worked here. Started in real estate. Started actually buying and selling some houses while I was going through college with a few friends, and didn't really make any money, but didn't really lose money, and just thought that I was really fascinated with real estate. So that was back in early 2000s. But because I wasn't really making any money, I thought, I like real estate. I want to find a way to make a career out of it. So I actually got into residential real estate first in 2004. I did that for a year and didn't really see that as a long-term career that I wanted to do. So in 2005, I got into commercial real estate. Thought I'd be doing offices, retail, that sexy area of commercial real estate. Everybody in the office that I joined was mostly in industrial real estate. I had no idea what it was, but because everybody was working in it, it just seemed like the natural spot to learn organically through everybody there. And fast forward 20 years, I've made my career off industrial real estate, and I live, breathe, and sleep it. If anyone follows me on any social media, it's literally all that I think about, talk about, live, breathe, and sleep it. I've been a broker for 20 years. I started investing myself 10 years ago. So I've got the majority of my net worth directly invested in industrial real estate. And 4 years ago, I started a podcast just on a mission to interview everybody regarding industrial real estate in any capacity whatsoever. So architects, engineers, electricians, property owners, property managers, lawyers, you name it. I'm on a mission to either have them on the show, have them come back, or have them come on in the first place. So I love everything to do with industrial real estate.
Well, I got a question right off the bat. If you love industrial real estate so much, why don't you marry it?
I would if I could. I don't think it's legal. Like, Canada's pretty restrictive. We got a lot of draconian laws. I don't think it would be legal to marry industrial real estate. But if we got a more progressive government in here and they could actually sanction that, and I could get a priest, I would actually do it. I would marry it live stream. I'd marry industrial real estate during a live stream.
That's amazing. Hold on, this light just went off. I bet it got too hot.
That was a sign. That was a sign.
That was a sign.
That is the first time we've had the use of the word draconian on the show. I'm pretty sure.
That's really good.
That was well done.
This is a good throw.
Yeah, man. So we're going to be dark this episode?
I think you and I are going to be dark for a minute. I turned it all the way up to 100 because you were like, you're really dark. So I was like, I'll turn it up. But however,
everything else, my fault.
I'm the one who did it. So we'll get the lights back on here in a second. But, it's a podcast. At least people are...
Yeah. Well,
you're gonna listen
while we're waiting for the lights to regenerate or whatever they're going to do. I think I've told this story before, but I haven't told it to Chad. I was invited when my daughter was, I think, a 5th grader, to come to her school for like career day, and a couple of the parents would come and they would talk about what they do. So I was going to talk about what I do, but it's really not the easiest thing to describe. Like, commercial real estate to an elementary school student is kind of ethereal, like hard to grasp. It's probably not the right, nebulous.
No,
whatever.
I think the word you're looking for is boring.
Hey, that's blasphemous.
But I went through and I was like, all right, I'm going to describe the different types of commercial real estate. So, office is where your parents might go to work when they go to work. Or retail is where you go when you want to buy toys. You know, you'll go to Target, go to the toy aisle. That's retail, you know, where you go to shop and buy things. Multifamily, apartments, housing, that's where you live, you know. And then I said, have you ever seen those like big, ugly box buildings? They're like metal and ugly and stuff. And they were like, yeah, it's like, that's industrial real estate. But I started off and I asked them, I was like, do you guys understand what commercial real estate is? And you know what they thought it was? They thought I was in commercials on TV. That's what they thought. And I was like, nope. So I used to describe industrial real estate, especially to a fifth grader, in terms of it's those big, ugly, boxy metal buildings. Doesn't always have to be metal, of course, but and early on in my career, like I wasn't interested in industrial real estate at all. It didn't fit my eye. I didn't enjoy being there. You know, I was more interested in retail and multifamily, and we didn't do a tremendous, like our market here, Chad, is, you know, we've got 100,000 people. We're not on an interstate, and all the roads, all the highways end here. Like they come here and end. So it's not a great distribution hub. We don't have a big multifamily, or I'm sorry, we don't have a big industrial footprint here. So we just didn't do a tremendous amount of deals in industrial. But over the course of my last 20 years, come on over here, Timmy. This episode just quickly evolving. Holy moly. I'm going to keep looking this way. But I've fallen more and more in love with industrial. Like it's unique. It's different. It's got a lot of advantages. Of course, all you've heard about over the last 10 years, and especially during COVID and some of the, when offices getting just absolutely crushed, is all we heard about, multifamily and industrial, just doing great. But I've fallen more and more in love with industrial, and we actually own some of it now. So I've got a precast concrete tilt up 30,000 square foot warehouse. But yeah, I am interested to hear though from you, what are some of those things that make, you know, from your vantage point as the guy who eats and sleeps and breathes this stuff, wakes up in the morning thinking about industrial, what are some of the things that make industrial unique and potentially even better?
Yeah, and I'm very cautious to say that industrial is better than any other asset class, because I know a lot of people who've had a tremendous amount of success in other areas, whether it's multifamily. Some investors have done well in office and retail. So I think industrial is different. And one of the how I describe industrial, and I like your way of describing it to a group of grade fives, because if you can explain it to someone that's 10, 11 years old, you can explain it to anybody. I look at industrial very basically. It's buildings where things are made or buildings where things are stored. But that's a very quick way of describing it. But the one building that I love to illustrate, and it's why I get so passionate about industrial, is the Boeing factory just outside of Seattle in Everett. And Boeing's had a lot of problems lately. Sure. I don't think they're regarded as the steward of craftsmanship lately. But that factory, it's a 4 million square foot building. I've heard different numbers on it. I've heard the ceiling heights are 90 feet. I've heard the ceiling heights are 110 feet. Whatever they are, that's much higher than a normal industrial building, such that the cubic footage of that building, it's the actual volume of the building, it's the biggest building by volume in the world. World record, actually. It was a Guinness World Record for the biggest building by volume. And what I find so fascinating about it is that building, all the raw materials come into it, everything required to make an airplane, 4 million square feet, tens of thousands of employees, and they assemble it in very, just like, how do you eat an elephant? You start one bite at a time. How do you build an airplane? You start one piece at a time. And through that whole entire production line, a 747 used to come out. They've retired that in 2022. But an airplane comes out that building, which is so fascinating to think that everything that we have, these microphones that we're using, the computers that we're on, everything that we have was made in a warehouse or is stored in a warehouse. So that's typically how I like breaking it down. Things are made there or things are stored there. Can be stored there for a couple minutes, can be stored there for years. But that's how you're going to kind of differentiate industrial in my mind. And I'm guessing that 30,000 square foot building that you guys bought is similar to that. Does one of those two things anyways. That's what
right.
I just find so exciting about industrial, and at a very high level. It gets much more detailed than that, and there's a lot of moving parts, literally and figuratively, inside the building itself. But that's how I generally sum up industrial.
Another thing I'm curious about too is because you a few times already have talked about how it's an ugly building. But what I saw, but I mean, a lot of them are. You can't argue with that. It's just a regular, nothing interesting about it. But I saw on your X profile, formerly known as Twitter, Chad, that you posted a particular architect that makes industrial look really, really cool, which, seems to be what you're speaking about, some things of why you love it so much too. Is that?
Yeah, it's the full spectrum. You do have a lot of industrial that is old, tired looking, almost looks like it could be in a horror film. Like, and it's funny actually, because ever since I've just become such a fan of industrial real estate, I see it everywhere. So you'll be watching a movie and there'll be somebody that's kidnapped and put in, held as a hostage. It's always in a dark warehouse every single time. It's this old rundown warehouse. But so you have the full spectrum of that really old distressed property, all the way up to new modern buildings, which are built with a very high architectural aesthetic to it. And it's funny, actually, I'm such a real industrial real estate nerd, and this will reinforce it. But I've even looked back a lot on the history of industrial real estate. And there's one property, I have a picture of it framed in my office it's called the Fagus Factory in Germany, in Alfeld, Germany. It was built by an architect, Walter Gropius, and he's the guy who did Bauhaus, the architectural school. This was 1913 that they built this industrial building, which is a shoe last factory, still actually used for shoe last to this day, 110 years later. Wow. But it's an unbelievable property. I've put it on my Twitter or X a few times now. This 110-year-old industrial building, which looks awesome, has a glass facade, looks fantastic. It's just, in my mind, you think of industrial and it can be that really boring or ugly type of property, but there's also examples where they just look really cool. So that's just one of the reasons that I just find industrial so fascinating, is that it's the full spectrum of what you could expect a building to be, and it's just so much more than that proverbial four walls and a roof that a lot of people try to classify it as.
So let's do this. Let's break down industrial a little bit. Let's talk about the different classes. Let's talk about the different subcategories. Oh yeah. Okay. Here we go.
So this is a good example of something that looks industrial that we made look really cool. And this is one of your spaces, but this was for a horror movie that I did a music video for. I was in it, and then we just took a big old light, and that was a banana, and just ate a bunch of bananas, threw some lights up there. But yeah, it's so perfectly used for.
I'm so glad I gave you the key that day.
I am too. You still haven't seen this all the way through, have you?
No, this is my first time.
Yeah, that's me.
And I understand that your character in this case is in his version of heaven.
That's
after
right.
He's passed.
Yeah, I made it
murdered or whatever.
I made the choice to never be able to open a banana in the movie. Just every time you walk in on me, I'm trying to open a banana.
You need a banana peeler.
Yeah, I need something like that. Anyway, that made me think of that. Go on. What were we saying?
But yeah, there's so many different types of industrial. There's different classes of industrial, and we've kind of hinted around at it a little bit. But let's kind of geek out on Timmy a little bit here and help him understand, like today, 2024, we're right in the middle of the year, beginning of Q3 2024, and the lights are back.
Baby.
So Class A industrial is wildly different than Class B industrial, which is potentially just not as old as Class C industrial. So let's give Timmy a really good idea of what is Class A industrial in 2024.
Yeah, and I think before we even jump into that, but we should even differentiate between those different subcategories.
Okay.
Because there's a big difference between warehousing and manufacturing space. So warehousing has probably been the most popular subcategory over the last 10 to 20 years. And that's just due to the massive ramp up of e-commerce. So all this stuff that gets stored in warehouses, that's driven by e-commerce. And that's what probably most people are probably familiar with. Like if you look on the outside of a airport or on a major highway now, you've probably seen a big distribution center go up, maybe like an Amazon or a FedEx or even a Home Depot. These warehouses, that's what they're designed for. They're storing goods for some period of time. If it's call it like a cross-dock facility, those goods might literally be in there for 10 or 15 minutes. They come in on one truck, they get repackaged, and they get sent out right away.
So you can't you just explained it. I'm sorry to interrupt, but you just explained it. But you can't just throw terms like cross-dock, Timmy, without slowing down a little bit. But let me just take. Oh,
that was good.
That's true, Bo. That's very true.
Thank you.
That's very true. Great. Thanks.
So imagine cross-dock facility. Imagine the big warehouse. Okay. You got a row of dock doors on one side and you got a row of dock doors on another side. They're unloaded. Oftentimes, the driver of that tractor trailer will unhook the trailer, drive around to the other side, and hook up to another one.
Oh.
And just go ahead and leave with it. All right. So a lot of efficiency here. When you unload the contents of whatever's in the trailer, it goes into the warehouse. It's repackaged. Because imagine sometimes you'll buy 4 things from Amazon, and they'll come in one package,
right?
And you're like, were they just sitting around in the same Where like how did they just have all this in one place? It'll come off maybe 3 different trucks. That stuff will move through. There's a ton of automation. It'll get repackaged inside. Almost never stops.
Wow!
And goes out the other side. Super efficient. And like I said, the driver will drop off a trailer, go around to the other side, pick up another one, and off they go. So
wow.
I mean, super. That's what he's talking about when he says cross dock.
Okay, cool.
And it's it's amazing logistically what they can do in those facilities.
Yeah, that's cool. That's cool. Oh, I'm getting it a little bit, Chad. I'm getting the love a little bit.
All
okay.
Right. Chad,
and
proceed.
Slow me down if I do say something that seems like it's out of place or a more advanced topic. But some of that stuff can be stored too. Like a lot of warehouses, they'll store inventory. It can be a company like Home Depot that wants to store winter goods that they might not be putting on display for another couple months. They need to still have that ready to go. So that a warehouse, it can be anywhere from minutes to months to years that they're going to store stuff. These buildings have the biggest thing that we've seen with these buildings is the ceiling height has increased considerably. So 20 years ago, it was more common to see 24-foot ceiling heights. And now it's common to see 36, 40, sometimes even higher than 40 feet. And the whole reason for that is they just take advantage of cubic footage. If you can put more racking in the space, now you're utilizing the space better with the same footprint. If you can just put an extra rack in there versus having to make the building itself bigger, it just becomes more economical. So there's been definitely an upward push in ceiling heights, but we've also seen more loading area. So for the area where trucks can actually come into the site and then back up without having impediments or without having to struggle or potentially try to jackknife the truck into a smaller space, sometimes called a loading court or a loading area or a marshalling area, different terminologies all over. But the whole concept is when a truck comes in, can it back up without having any issues? So that we've seen more attention given to that. And then some things inside, it's very common now to see every space sprinklered. Most municipalities will even require it over a certain size. So 20 years ago, not every building was sprinklered. Today, almost every modern building that I can think of has sprinkler systems. There's more care given to the HVAC systems or HVAC. There might be air circulation or makeup air. And I don't want to get too much into like the nuances of this, but it's basically the air quality. So there's more attention given to air quality now, as opposed to when you think of those old factories in a horror film, and the one that you showed, Timmy, is like a good example. That you can almost smell the air quality when you're watching a video like that, because it just looks so musty. That 20, 30 years ago, there wasn't a whole lot of attention given to that. Today, there's just a lot more attention given to worker satisfaction and worker health and the overall quality of the space. But those would probably be the big ones. Ceiling heights is an obvious one. The loading area, sprinklers, more attention to employee health. So that'd be on the warehouse side. But then on the other side, is the manufacturing side. And again, that's where I'd use the Boeing factory. It's buildings where things are made. Raw materials come in, or semi-raw materials come in. They're assembled, manufactured, produced, whatever happens with those products. It makes something else. It upgrades those products, and then they get sent out. And these buildings can be everything. It can be a 2,000 square foot machine shop where they just have a mill or a lathe or CNC in there, and they're perhaps milling metal. And same thing, they're manufacturing something that gets sent out. And then it can be all the way up to the Boeing factory of 4 million square feet. But the concept's the same. Something's being made, different type of requirement altogether. There really is a big difference between a manufacturing property and a warehouse. Huge. Most of the manufacturing ones, people drive stuff in, so you're going to have grade loading, similar to just driving your car into a garage.
When he says grade loading, it's those overhead doors that aren't actually a dock. You can just raise the door and drive straight in. It's grade level.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Okay.
Yeah. And then like you'd seen on a warehouse as well, like most warehouses will have dock loading. So it's typically 48 inches elevated above the ground so that trucks can back in, and then using either a pallet jack or a forklift, you can unload and load at the same level as the warehouse floor, which just makes it a lot easier. In manufacturing, it's more common as you see grade loading. So that's one of the main things. Ceiling height isn't as important. You're not going to typically see a lot of manufacturing buildings at 40-foot ceiling heights, but you'll see a lot more attention given to power, which is, in my mind, probably the most neglected part of the whole process in industrial real estate right now is power. And then you're going to probably see more land with it. You might see heavier utilities in general. You might see a bit more office. So there are nuances there. And again, I think that this is just what makes it so exciting, is that you can have two buildings side by side, which are going to be completely different and have completely different uses.
There's a building in Louisville, Kentucky, the big newspaper there, the Courier-Journal. And as newspapers have been consolidated, what they're doing now is they're printing the Indianapolis paper and the Louisville paper and the Cincinnati paper and all these big city papers. They're printing them at one place right now, and I think it's Indy. And then they just truck all the papers. So instead of having these different places, so I got to tour the Courier-Journal facility, which was a lot of office, but connected to it was, and it's a whole block in downtown Louisville. It was this huge manufacturing facility that was pieced together over time, and it had a garage, a basement system under it that looked like every episode of 24 was shot in the basement of the Courier-Journal building. But it had some really tall ceilings, which is a little bit unusual for manufacturing because the newer type of newspaper printing are 4 stories high. They're like vertical printing presses. And they just had like a whole row, which was probably a 50,000 square foot building, probably at least 4 or 5 stories high. And they just had these vertical presses, like printing presses. It was really, really interesting. So these buildings are often very, very specific to their use, especially if they're kind of an owner user and it was built for that purpose.
Right.
But yeah, let's mention a couple of the other, because you've talked about warehouse distribution center type spaces. You've talked about manufacturing, but there are some other subsets of industrial real estate. Everything from, self-storage would be a kind of a special use. But then there's like data centers or industrial space. Talk to us a little bit about data centers, or explain to Timmy kind of what kind of a big deal those are right now.
Huge. And I've been trying to come up with a name to describe these, and I did a poll on Twitter, and it was a dead heat. So I've back to the drawing board on trying to summarize this. But
well, we could figure it out right now.
Yeah. I'll get to it in a second, because the two that were tied was Tech Flex and Powered Industrial. So I like both of them. But let me explain what they are first, because that may help give a little bit more context. So outside of manufacturing and warehousing, and those are the two dominant ones, that makes up the vast majority of the industrial inventory. But there's three more that I've included, and I used to only include one. I used to include flex industrial, which I describe as any property zoned industrial in an industrial area that's used for purposes other than warehousing or manufacturing. And I own a flex building, so it's a perfect example to explain some of the tenants that we have in there. Right on a main road in our city for an industrial area, but it's still in an industrial park, zoned industrial, but we have an office tenant in there, a flower store, a cabinet showroom, an equestrian store, a hot tub store, and a wedding store we just put in there recently as well. So none of those are industrial tenants in a conventional sense, but that's a perfect flex property. And you can almost use it as like a catch-all. Like there's so many buildings you could have in there. I made a list once of different tenants, like churches, bottle depots, art galleries, any type of retailer that has a showroom or warehouse component. I think I came up with 30 different types of businesses that could theoretically go in there. The two that I've been adding recently, one is IOS, or industrial outdoor storage. This has existed forever, but it was always kind of almost a subcategory. But over the last 5 years, it's gained a considerable amount of attention. I don't even know who coined the term iOS. Probably from
Steve Jobs.
Probably to make it. So who? Sorry,
Steve Jobs.
Well, he definitely coined the iOS on the phone.
Yeah, he did.
That would be great if we could actually attribute it back to him. That'd be a video in the making for sure.
Yeah.
But that's typically industrial land or land with very low site coverage. So picture a 10,000 square foot building on 5 acres of land. So low site coverage or just land. And there's big use for this. I hear iOS on a daily basis now. So I've started including that one. And then another big one that's coming is exactly what you said, Bo. Data centers, EV production centers, gigafactories, which is kind of anything made for batteries having to do with EV vehicles, semiconductor plants. But there's one, this is just crazy to me, like how little the industrial sector still gets talked about in the grand scheme of things. In Phoenix right now, there's a $65 billion semiconductor plant underway from TSMC. $65 billion. Like it's a staggering investment.
Wow.
Intel's doing that $25 billion one just outside of Columbus. These semiconductor plants are massive investments in the area. So that's full circle on that topic. I'm trying to come up with a name that includes all of these different things: semiconductor plants, battery production, EV production, data centers. They all have a few things in common. They're all usually very big facilities. They have huge power requirements. They have huge water requirements, take up a lot of space. And they all kind of share that in common. So I'm trying to come up with the names. Those were the two that I had. TechFlex or Powered Industrial were a couple that were suggested. I like both of them. If you guys have any insight, I want to coin
I can almost
this.
guarantee you that we're gonna prefer the other one.
Which one?
TechFlex?
Yeah. Do you got one?
Oh, you guys will. You'll.
I like
split
Powered
the vote again.
Industrial.
Powered Industrial. Well, you could call it industrial software house.
Software. I
Yeah,
like what you
industrial software house. You can call it like it when you call me big data. If anybody gives you any flack on any of these warehouses, you could say, well, you can megabyte me.
Megabyte me.
Yeah, you just megabyte me. That's what I came up with.
I like
that was pretty
I
good.
like it when you call me Big Data. That's money.
I like it when you call me big data.
Yeah.
Already got a song.
Hey,
Got a
did
jingle
you-
already.
So let's ask Timmy a little question here.
Mm-hmm.
Most valuable company in the world is?
Tesla?
Nope.
Most valuable company in the world is Bill Gates.
Nope. It changed this week.
It changed this week?
Mm-hmm.
What was it before?
I think it was Apple.
Yeah, I think it was Apple too.
Oh,
But did you hear about this, Chad? It's NVIDIA.
NVIDIA.
Oh yeah, that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So here's why this pertains to industrial real estate, and especially, I like it when you call me big data
Yeah.
storage.
Yeah. Yes.
NVIDIA makes the GPUs. Basically, they make the chips that allow for these large language models because their chips run in parallel. What used to happen is for computers were built so that they could run one thing at a time. And so there was a bottleneck on how fast they could process and run tasks to how fast they could cycle one thing at a time. Kind of like, daisy chaining a bunch of batteries, or like when you put your lights on the Christmas tree, and one light goes out, and all of them go off.
Right.
Those aren't running parallel. But if you have one that runs, one light goes out, but the rest of them still work, like they're wired in parallel. I think that's correct.
Okay.
So what NVIDIA did is they invented a chip that did all of those functions in parallel.
Wow.
And they weren't in a line waiting to get processed one at a time.
Oh, wow.
And so when they came up with that, like that technology allowed for gaming. Like they started.
Oh, right.
Like when we were kids and gaming got real big on computers.
Right.
It was those graphic cards that NVIDIA made that ran in parallel that were so powerful. And that's the technology that is allowed for generative AI.
Oh, yes.
Because it takes such a big processing power. So now they make, instead of CPUs, they make GPUs that are these huge monster processing, like the parallel processing cards. So these big data centers are in such big demand because of AI. AI is requiring all this processing power, and NVIDIA is the leader in creating the chips that can run in parallel and make all that happen, which is creating a massive demand for data center space.
Right. Oh, right.
Because that's where all this is.
I like it when you call me big data.
Yeah.
That's right. You could be the top G. And if you smell bad, people might be like, hey, top G, PU. I'm on a...
You're rolling this morning.
It's good.
Or this afternoon. That's pretty good. Anyway, little side tangent there, but the data center space and these properties as investments are selling for crazy amounts of money.
Wow.
Like $1,500 a square foot.
Well, wow.
Like way up in the, depending on where they are.
Now, does the location of these matter, or do they just need a place to store it so they can store it wherever they find? So, for instance, like the reason in Owens, and I ask this because in Owensboro, we don't have much demand for industrial. And one of the biggest reasons is because we don't have, an in and out interstate going through it, right? We kind of stop here.
But we do have a significant amount of our jobs here are manufacturing jobs.
Right.
So we've got that manufacturing real estate, which doesn't transact very often.
Oh, right.
Like it's not turning over, and it's often owner-user space. So the people that own the facility are using it to make their stuff. So it's not often, at least not around here. So there's not a lot of transactional velocity in the industrial market. But we do have a lot of manufacturing space for a town our size because a lot of our jobs are there. Like 17% of the jobs in Owensboro are manufacturing, something like that.
But for the need for all this big data, right? For the, like when you call me big data spaces, can they just be anywhere? Like
I've got an opinion, but Chad, what would you say?
Yeah, Chad knows.
You're going to be the expert here.
Yes and no. So most of these data centers right now are actually in Virginia.
Yep.
So I can't remember what the exact stat is, but it's a lot. It's something like 50% of all data centers in the world are in Virginia.
Wow.
Which comes with a lot of problems in itself because residents there are getting sick of it. So it's like anything. Like industrial, as great as I think it is, I also recognize that it has some potential drawbacks, and people don't necessarily want to have a distribution center in their backyard. To me, that'd be my dream house. If I could look at a distribution center out of my backyard, I mean, that'd be way better than a beach view.
I love the passion.
But he would be alone in that neighborhood,
Yeah, not everyone shares that same zeal with me. So I get it. Even in Virginia, people are getting a little tired of it. But there's a reason that they've all a lot of them have chosen Virginia is because a lot of access to power. There's a lot of infrastructure already in place there. There's a lot of access to water. These things, understandably, people can understand pretty easily that they require a considerable amount of power, but what they don't realize is that they also require a lot of water to keep them cool.
Yep.
So you need to have access to both power and water. There's also a whole bunch of things in there as well that vibrations matter. So like they kind of want to be close to airports, but they can't be too close to airports. They want to be close to major roads, but they can't be too close to major roads. So there's all these factors that play into it. Ideally, people want to be close to big population bases because that's just the most efficient way to deliver it. But they still need to take into account what's the community appetite to have a big data center in the area, how much is available for power, and these things generate a considerable amount of power. Like in some cases, the equivalent of like 500,000 homes worth of power for one data center.
Wow.
And then you still need to have a lot of access to water and so forth. So there's a lot that gets factored into it. But there's data centers being proposed or companies looking at site selection options all over the world right now because all these challenges prohibit where they can actually go. But a lot of them are in Virginia. Like that's just a heavy hot spot, but they're being proposed in numerous different markets right now.
So yeah, could they put one anywhere? Yeah, but they're not. They're looking at the utility situation almost as much as anything else.
Sure. I mean, the need for power, you gotta.
And that's a comparative advantage that Kentucky has over a lot of states in the United States.
Oh,
it's
right.
cheap to do business here, but you wouldn't necessarily want to put a data center in Owensboro if you could put one closer to a larger population center, because you do need some specific skilled labor. You need to have access to some of that. You need to be able to distribute the outputs of the data center. So the closer you are to a larger population center, the more attractive that would be. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised 20 years from now if data centers were kind of infilled all over primary and secondary markets and maybe in some tertiary markets as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, certain places have serious advantages because of power and water.
Yeah. Right.
I completely agree. On that topic as well, this is a thought that I had recently, is that technology changes so quickly and often in unpredictable ways that what happens if we do have this race to add as many data centers as we can and we see them popping up all over, and these are quite often single purpose buildings. They're only built to be data centers.
Right.
They probably don't have any overhead doors. They're built to be data centers, and they're very expensive, like you said. What happens if it's 10 years down the road there's a new technology that comes out, and this is way out of my lane, way above my pay grade, but if quantum computing or something
I was thinking the same thing
along those lines can make it much more efficient to store all this data, because right now it's server intensive. If there is a technology that comes 10 years down the road or 50 years down the road and it renders a lot of the space unnecessary, are these buildings automatically obsolete, or do they require a considerable amount of money to retrofit? I don't know. Some of these things just keep me up at night thinking about like what could actually happen, because like we've seen it in office as an example, right? Is nobody factored in 2019, nobody was sitting around a boardroom table saying, what's an existential crisis that could happen in our market?
Right.
And not one person was like, oh, you know what, a global pandemic could wipe out the need to have as much office space as we have, and we could have a tremendous setback. Nobody was thinking about that, but that was obviously a real risk. Are we thinking about that in industrial? Because everything cycles. And we will have that in industrial at some point. We can't just keep having this exponential growth that keeps going up. And data centers, as great as it is and as imperative and necessary as we need these to be right now, there still are risks that come with that. And I'd be very reticent to invest in data centers, even though they look so appealing right now. And like you said, Bo, they're going up everywhere. They're selling for crazy prices. They're in high demand. Those are some of the things that I wonder is, what does that actually look like in 10 years?
When I look at something like that, like I would have heartburn with the risk for the same reason. Like, you know, I've read a couple science fiction books where quantum computing is a real thing and it changes everything. Like it's my lack of understanding of that industry that would cause me to be nervous about its potential obsolescence if some kind of tech just wipes out the need for it.
Right.
Exactly what he said. You've got single-use buildings that what on earth do you do with all this space if it's not a data center? It's not well designed for anything else.
Right.
Almost like all these people that buy dollar stores that are sitting in the middle of a cornfield, that's mailbox money for 10, 20 years. But when that stops being a dollar store, it's a barn with low ceilings. You know, there's not really another use for it. So I'd have to get really, really comfortable with the industry. And I probably wouldn't go through the brain damage of doing that.
Right.
I'd probably just avoid investing in data centers.
Well, all this, like with the data center and stuff, have you seen Silicon Valley, Chad, that show?
I haven't, no.
Oh, okay. In the show, this guy is creating a new internet, and he figured out a way to access everybody's phone to share data. So it's not all at some kind of data.
So he's using the excess capacity of everybody's phones for data storage.
And so he's able to compress the data down in a way where it's still on your phone, but it's not taking up data space. It's using space throughout the whole network of all phones. And so that just made me think of, you know, what you're talking about there. It's like, oh, something very easily could come about with how fast technology is moving to not need all that space anymore, that physical space.
Well, let's talk about classes a little bit because I really want to get Chad's opinion on how the different classes affect each other.
Okay.
When I talk about different classes, we're really talking about Class A, Class B, and Class C. And Class A buildings, and Chad, you can correct me or back me up on this, they're basically the nicest, newest in the market. Okay. So when he was describing warehouse and distribution centers, the Class A buildings are going to be 500,000 square feet, million square feet and up. They're going to have the really high ceilings. So like the volumetric space is a huge, huge deal. Being able to rack all the way to the ceiling, being able to utilize automation to be more efficient, all that stuff. They're going to have those really big concrete skirts around the building like he was describing so that the trucks can maneuver easily and all that stuff. Class A buildings are the newest and nicest stuff. They're big. They're what? So would that be a fairly simple way to describe Class A? Would you?
That's exactly how I describe it too.
So what then is Class B? If that's Class A, what's Class B?
Yeah, and there's some blurring of the lines between what Class B and Class C is. It's pretty easy to identify Class A. It's exactly as you said. If you compare it to an office or retail, it's the newest, it's the fanciest, it's got all the bells and whistles. It's no different than industrial. Where it starts getting a little bit challenging to categorize is when you get into that Class B, Class C, because and people might describe it differently. You and I might have a little bit different definitions of it, but generally it's going to be a little bit older property. Class C might be 50 years old. Maybe Class B is 20 years old. You could have a really nice building that's 50 years old too, that encroaches in that Class B space. So it gets a little bit hard to really identify. So I'd say Class B and Class C, that's kind of what you're getting on a sliding scale. Is you're going to lose some utility of lower ceiling heights. You're probably going to have a little bit lower of a marshalling or loading area in there. You might not have sprinklers. You might not have a really nice office space up front. Might be a dated property. Probably doesn't have the same efficiency from an energy standpoint. Those are the things that you get. And if you start going from a Class B to a Class C, that you can just imagine it being a little bit less as you start going from that B to a C. I personally love Class B and Class C. My portfolio is all in that Class B space and maybe Class C as well.
And that's why I wanted to ask you this next question. I was listening to one of your recent episodes on your podcast, and you were talking about this a little bit, and I thought it was a great point. But share with us why you like Class B and Class C, but what's the thing about Class B that makes it attractive in a lot of ways?
What I enjoy most about it is that Class A stuff, first of all, you're competing against institutional grade money, and you're competing against like really big companies like a Prologis or a BlackRock or just really well-backed institutional funds. And a lot of that product, they can just add it at will. Like if they decide that they want to go in and add a new 1 million square foot building across the street, providing that the land's there's no geographical impediments, they can just go and add it. Whereas that Class B space, for the most part, you're going to have that in established industrial areas. And that's actually a really important thing to say about Class B and C as well, is that traditionally those are in established industrial areas. If you could, most big cities have somewhat of a ring road or a way of delineating the boundaries of the city. You can think of that Class B, Class C within that boundary. A lot of the big distribution centers have now been pushed more into the suburbs because that's where the only industrial land is. That Class B, C is servicing a lot of either the B2B or B2C inside of that city. And it's very difficult to replace that. And most people aren't. If you look at all the inventory that's been added in the majority of markets across the world, it's all been big box warehouse space. There's been very little added in terms of that Class B, Class C, even just small bays. If you can think of an average warehouse being built right now, they might be catering to 100,000 square foot tenants and up. The Class B, my portfolio, my average tenant size, if I were to really look at it, is probably like 4,000 square feet. It's very difficult to build at a price that's competitive right now with the existing inventory, that there's almost a ceiling on the inventory that can even be added, even if developers wanted to, because they'd have to charge 50% more than what I charge just to get a tenant in there and make it economical. So that the supply on that Class B, Class C has been relatively fixed for 30 years. But providing you're in a market that's seeing population growth, then you need more companies for doing electricians. You need more HVAC companies. You need more companies that just supply all the population. And that inventory has been fixed. So you're almost got a hedge on your downside risk that as long as population is growing, the inventory isn't keeping up with the demand. So you're getting into this supply-demand unequilibrium situation where it's just you're able to put upward pressure on rents and by extension, upward pressure on your values.
Yeah. And that's exactly what I wanted you to say. Class B industrial in a lot of markets, especially the ones that are growing, they're not making any more of it.
Oh.
None.
So like the amount of it is fixed.
Oh, yeah.
Because if you're going to build something new, you're going to build the Class A stuff.
Right.
So if it's a growing place, there's going to be more demand and the supply is fixed. So what happens to rents?
They go up.
And what happens to vacancy?
It goes down.
And wouldn't you want to own something like that?
Or sell it to Pawn Stars.
Oh, maybe.
Yeah.
But that's... Class B industrial is a really, really nice space.
Yeah.
And you're often dealing with mom and pops,
with
especially 4,000 or 5,000 square foot tenants. It might be their only location.
Right.
Their whole net worth is tied up into that company. They're going to make sure it works. And if it fails for some reason and they bounce, how long does it take you to find somebody else to take their space? Like a week?
Right.
There's so much demand for this space. So Class B industrial in a lot of places, in a lot of markets, is just a really, really nice space in the market.
Yeah.
And it's often overlooked because it's not as new, it's not as pretty, single tenant net lease-ish.
Right.
So there's a little bit more management to it, but man, it's a good space.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Never would have thought of that. Never would have thought of that.
And I don't see what changes that either. Like if you start looking at potential threats to industrial real estate, I look at technology changing the ones that we already talked about. I look at changes in buyer patterns, that if companies decide that they don't need as much warehouse space because they want to do more just-in-time inventory management where they're only ordering things when they need it versus, and we've kind of in this spot right now of just in case inventory management, where companies want to have a lot of stock on hand to avoid stockouts or running out of inventory. If there's a shift back in the way companies approach this, or there's a shift back in the way that consumers want to deal with this, we could be faced with a scenario where we have way too much warehouse space. I think that I can't say for sure. I have no idea what happens in the future. I just look at that as a potential risk. I don't see many scenarios where there's a decrease in demand for these small bay class B spaces, because you need to have an electrician, you need to have an HVAC repair company, you need to have a small little showroom for all these different places that are selling things. I haven't yet in my mind, and I'm open to it. If anyone sees an existential threat to small bay class B or C industrial, I'd love to hear it. And I promise I'll keep an open mind on it. I just haven't seen anything where I see a material threat to the demand side. And I do not see a scenario where the supply can just increase, because the cost of construction right now, the cost of buying land and then building this stuff, like I mentioned earlier, you need to charge a massive premium to justify it. And most of these companies aren't looking for a brand new space. They really just want 4 walls and a roof. They are the ones that look at this very simply, and it just becomes a numbers game to them on what their business can afford to pay in rent. So if I'm 50% of what a new space needs to charge to justify it, I'm going to keep that tenant all the time. So I don't see a scenario where we could run into a situation where demand wanes, or where supply gets added dramatically and it affects that supply demand curve. I just don't see that. Again, I'm open to it. If someone here knows something that I don't, I'm definitely open to it. But I've invested heavily in this investment thesis on that basis, and it sounds like, Bo, you're in full support of that as well. I just I see it as such a great spot to have money for the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah,
Makes
nice.
sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. It makes total sense. Yeah.
Now, let me ask you this, because I don't know. I've never been to Canada. I got to fix that sometime soon. In fact, next year, the fall governance meetings for CCIM is in Montreal, and that may be the first time that I go to Canada.
Let's go.
Yeah.
Let's go.
But around here in January, Kentucky is going to allow medical marijuana.
Let's go.
Yeah, I knew you would be excited about that.
Here we go.
Go ahead.
Thank you for totally throwing off my train of thought.
So
here's what we've got going on right now. Every cannabis company on the planet is calling every broker in Kentucky, wanting to tie up space, wanting to tie up growing space or cultivation space, or whatever they call it, in the hopes that they can win the lottery system and get a handful of licenses and actually operate what's essentially more like a pharmacy than a retail store.
Sure.
But they're tying up a bunch of retail space. They're tying up, some industrial space, mainly more of the Class B, 30,000 square foot and up. Matter of fact, we're having a hard time servicing our other clients. We're getting so many calls and just written offers contingent upon them getting one of those licenses. It's driving us nuts. Have y'all, how have you seen the cannabis industry affect the industrial real estate market, or have you? I don't know if that even touches Canada or if you're dealing with the same thing.
Yeah, we legalized it nationally a number of years ago, and it sounds like you are on the cusp of where we were at that exact same time when it was coming down the pipe.
Well, tell me what's coming down the pipe.
It was the equivalent of a gold rush. It was the green rush. Everybody wanted a piece of that. And there's the same thing. We were being inundated with calls of people that wanted to open up these spaces before they even knew. People were writing unconditional offers on space without even having the license, just to get ahead of this.
Yep.
And it was pandemonium. Everybody wanted in on it, on the growing side, all the way to the distribution, to the retailing side. It was nuts. And like human nature is often culpable of, is that they overestimated by a considerable amount how much demand there actually would be for this. Everyone's got a model. They'll say, okay, well, Now we're going to have all these people that are going to start smoking marijuana or edibles and whatever it is. And so we can extrapolate that out and say, we thought we needed 50,000 square feet worth of growing space. We need 500,000 square feet worth of growing space. And then there's 10 companies that think like that. We went through that exact same craziness only to find out that now that it was legal, that doesn't mean that everybody's just smoking a pound of weed every day. It was much, much smaller. There was an uptick. And if anytime you make something legal and more accessible, there will be an uptick, but it wasn't nearly at the forecast that everybody was thinking they'd get rich on. And it's led to a number of the growers either going out of business altogether or having to vacate their facility. I can think of a couple off the top of my head that were sizable ones. Like one was 80,000 square feet. Another was 700,000 square feet. Another one, there's another one I think was 100 and something thousand square feet that are all now vacant. They were set up and they spent a considerable amount of money, like a lot of investment in these facilities, and now they're vacant or they've been repurposed. And same on the retail side, where there were so many of these and a lot of them aren't making money, so they've consolidated or closed down or have had to sublease their space. Like there is blood in the streets from that massive uptick where everybody thought they were going to get rich off of this, to realizing that demand wasn't nearly what was being forecasted, to now being in a situation where the market's correcting itself and a lot of people have lost big as a result.
Wow.
So let me ask you this, because you guys did this at a national level. So you went from 0 to 100 just like that, correct?
Yep.
Okay. So in the States, we've done it state by state. And some states have gone from 0 to 100, right? Where it's flat legal. Some states have gone from 0 to, with a prescription, it's legal. That's what Kentucky's doing. If you've got a doctor's prescription, it would be legal to possess, use, etc., sell. I wonder if the staggered start we've had in the states, where Kentucky can look at, say, Missouri and say, okay, this is the process they went through. And so in Kentucky, we're going to be able to prevent this oversupply because we've got examples of what other states have done before us. Do you think that's maybe a reason why Canada so oversupplied?
Well, we had that too. We had it before it was legal without any reason. It was doctor prescribed, and we had that in place before as well. It was starting to ramp up at that point, and when the tea leaves were saying that there's got to be a good time.
Yeah, that's great.
The marijuana leaves, when the marijuana leaves were suggesting that this was coming down the road, then that's when it really started ramping up. I just think that for the most part, a lot of people are blindly optimistic, and they think that there's an opportunity to make money, and they think that this is a revolutionary time. And we're all probably guilty of overestimating what the demand is going to be. And just in my experience, and this has been across the board in Canada, it happened with everybody that got into the marijuana space got crushed. So hopefully, I mean, I'd say that for your guys' sake, hopefully they can. I personally would steer away from it. I don't, there's not enough of a business case there in my mind to backstop like an investment. I did invest in some at the beginning and got wiped out on my investments. I would never do it again. If anything, I'd be looking to see what companies have seen a considerable increase in their stock price as news starts coming out, and I'd look to short those companies. Not financial advice.
Yeah.
I don't know anything what I'm talking about. I'm a guy wearing a tuxedo shirt, so don't listen to me for any type of advice.
Don't listen to me regarding cannabis. I'm wearing a tuxedo t-shirt.
I kind of wish I wore the Canadian tuxedo.
Yeah.
I'm filled with regret right now. But if that's what I'd look to do is I based just on what Canada went through, I'm guessing there's companies in the US right now that are publicly traded. I'd look to see what their stock price is. It's probably going up considerably, unless they figured out something that all the people in Canada haven't. And there's smart people that were behind this. There's very well-funded smart people. I don't see how that exponential growth is sustainable, especially once the actual demand materializes, because it's all projections right now.
Yeah.
And we're all guilty of creating rosy pro formas and saying, well, if this happens and this happens and this happens, we're rich.
Right.
Everybody can make that rosy looking pro forma, but until you actually know what demand is, it's very speculative. So, I mean, I hope for your guys' sake, because it's left a lot of people in the wake that have lost money. I hope for your guys' sake you can figure it out. But if it's anything like Canada, it was a very quick rise and a very quick fall.
Wow.
Well, that's good to know.
Yeah, it is good to know.
You got questions?
I don't think so.
What haven't I asked you that I should?
Man, that's such a good question.
To
I started asking
save-
people that too.
to record for posterity
Mm-hmm.
Chad Griffiths' take on industrial real estate.
Yeah.
Like, what else do we need to put on the record?
I think the one thing that I've been very consistent talking about on my podcast and when I talk to other people is most people shouldn't invest in industrial real estate. And I am clearly very excited about industrial real estate. And I hope that shows. And I
shows.
love it. And I talk about it all the time. Yeah. No secret there.
Yeah.
I think that most people should actually avoid it. And I say that because there's a lot of risk that comes with industrial real estate that isn't present in other asset classes. So if you buy a multifamily building, say you go out and buy a 20-unit multifamily building, if you're buying that in a good area and vacancy rates are low and there's population growth and the economic fundamentals look good, your downside risk is very low. Like 10% maybe. And most of that would actually probably be systemic risk beyond what happens in that little market. It might be like a global interest rate adjustment or something that happens in the world. Provided that the market keeps going along, your downside risk is very low in multifamily. In industrial, your downside risk is huge. And it's really the epitome of dumb money that can get into industrial real estate. And they listen to me talk and they say, well, this sounds really exciting for all the reasons that you talked about. And they want to go out and buy a property and they find one. And maybe I'll use a hypothetical example, which is very common. They see a building for sale that's got 3 years left on the lease, and the company that's been in there has been in there for 25 years, and it looks like they're getting a good return, and they go through some basic due diligence. They buy the property, hoping that tenant renews. 3 years comes up, the tenant decides that they're going to move. They do a hard look at that asset, and they figure out that asset was built specifically for that company that was in there, and it's going to cost them a considerable amount of capital expenditure to retrofit it for the next tenant. Maybe you can't even replace that income stream. Maybe the next tenant that comes in won't value it as high as that previous one did. So you could be in a situation where you have to pay to retrofit it and then also accept a lower rate. Now your property has gone from a value of X to a percentage of X. And I have seen this happen. I've seen this happen numerous times with that dumb money where people just aren't prepared to spend all the time they need to spend. They're not willing to spend years learning everything about the industry, the business, the demand drivers, the supply intricacies. They're not willing to actually invest in all that time, and they make a mistake, and that mistake can be catastrophic. And I don't see that in other asset classes, office notwithstanding. I think office is a different conversation altogether, but I don't see that in multifamily, even in retail. If you're buying a good property in a good neighborhood, you're not going to see that same risk of having to accept lower rate from a tenant because the building was specifically built for somebody in the past. That's why I say that the average investor should steer away from industrial, either look to become a limited partner or invest in a REIT or joint venture with someone that's very experienced, that's already done it. But to try and go about it solo, I think your risk far exceeds the upside. So that's one thing I like putting on record, is that as enthusiastic as I am about industrial, I don't think it's for everybody. In fact, I think it's not for most people.
What I'm hearing you saying is everyone who's interested in industrial, because they have listened to your podcast or follow you on X, should continue to listen to your podcast and follow you on X for at least 4 to 5 years and take notes before they jump in and decide to go industrial.
and smash the like button along the way too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
smash
right.
that like button, baby. Smash that like button. My question was going to be like, what would you just say to somebody, like somebody new? There's this account on X that that you responded to the last couple days called Brand New Broker, which I think is a great idea. Whoever started that, do you know who the person actually is?
I don't.
Whoever started that, I think, is great. And they're basically they just started as a broker, and they're documenting everything they're doing and asking the questions that most people are scared to ask, right? And I just think that's awesome. But what would you say to somebody who's new to the business that's interested in industrial? I think you answered that right there. But if you were to add anything else to somebody who's like, I love industrial like you, and maybe I don't know as much, but I want to go into it. What advice would you give them to start? What should they do that first year or two as they're gaining their knowledge?
Are you talking like somebody who's gotten into brokerage and wants to specialize in industrial? Or are you talking about?
I am.
Okay.
Yeah, I am.
All right.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I would say it's a field where you need to be passionate about. And to some extent, I think that's, if you're going to be successful in anything, you should have a passion about it.
Sure.
But you do have to take a long-term approach with it. And what I would say to someone starting out, and specifically for someone in brokerage, but even for someone looking to invest in it, follow two paths simultaneously. The first path is you need to become an expert in what industrial real estate is. You have to study that extensively. And there's some great resources out there. There's a couple guys on Twitter right now, they're talking about electricity. One guy's an engineer for sure. I don't know what the other guys are. They're putting out some awesome videos just about power in an industrial capacity. So there are resources out there. That's path number one.
Who are those guys?
What is their name? Actually, I don't have my Twitter open right now. I'll send it to you guys so you can add it to the show notes.
Yeah,
perfect.
great.
But that's path one, is you have to commit to becoming an expert in industrial real estate. So that's knowing everything about buildings, knowing everything about what tenants want in a building, know what potential pitfalls can be in a building, know all those things so that you could avoid making that mistake that I talked about buying a building that perhaps won't release at the same rate. You've got to be able to make sure that you're mitigating all those risks. And the only way to do that is you have to become a bona fide expert in industrial real estate. Second path is you have to understand your local market as well as anybody in your market. Ideally, you are the expert. Nobody knows as much about industrial real estate as you are. So that's every deal that's happening.
Nobody knows more than me. I know the most.
The best. You need to be the best.
Yeah.
So every deal that's in the market, every company that's in the market, deals that just got sold, leases that just happened, trends in the market, new developments coming in the pipeline, new zoning rules that are coming. You need to know everything about that market so that you can combine those two things simultaneously when you're talking to either a client or when you're looking at a property. You now know everything about industrial real estate and what it is, and you know everything that's happening in your market. You combine those two things and start talking to as many people as you can, you're unstoppable, man. Like that is, you are unstoppable. It'll take time, and that's not an easy thing. You don't accomplish either one of those things in a couple months. I actually read more now than I did when I started 20 years ago. So it's a never ending thing. You're going to want to try and get up to a baseline as quickly as you can. You recognize that that is something that is a lifelong pursuit of becoming an expert in what industrial real estate is and understanding what's happening in the market. But you do those two things, you stick to it, you put your head down and you commit to doing those two things, you are unstoppable.
Yeah, if anybody wants to see an example other than Chad of this, see Bob Knackle.
Oh yeah,
The best.
Right.
He's the GOAT.
Yeah, he's the GOAT. He's the GOAT. That's great.
Yeah, that's great advice. Great advice. I completely agree. All right.
Yeah.
Are you ready now?
Yeah, I am.
All right. Let's have a pop quiz.
Yes!
All right.
That is so good.
Chad, as our special guest, we're going to ask Timmy 5 questions. You get to go first. We're going to alternate back and forth. And so the parameters here are you can ask him whatever you want about anything you want, whether it's about this, what we've talked about today, or whether it's you want to throw him a complete curveball. He's got 73, 74, 75 episodes under his belt, and he's not the idiot he started out to be.
That's right.
when it comes to commercial real estate. So it's quite a bit of knowledge. So without further ado, question 1.
All right, I got one. How big is the Boeing factory in Everett?
Say that one more time. How big is the Boeing factory in Everett?
Yeah.
Whoops, wrong button. In square feet?
Yes, because I didn't mention the cubic footage, so in square feet.
– 50,000 square feet. 500,000 square feet.
Still a little short.
What? 5 million square feet.
Overshot it a bit.
4.5 million square feet.
We could probably narrow this down over the next half an hour, but it might not be the most entertaining.
Tell me.
We have 4 million square feet. 4
4
million. Square
million.
feet.
Okay.
And by volume, the largest building in the world.
Yes. Oh, right. That must have been when I had my crotch in your face trying to fix the light.
I did notice that was happening. Yes.
Good question.
All right. Question 2. What does... I think you're going to get that one if I ask it. I'll ask it anyway.
Okay.
What does iOS stand for?
I know S is storage and O is outside. Industrial's outside storage? Or it's storage outside?
Yes. iOS?
Nailed it.
Hey, there it is. Still trying to remember where, what buttons are what. All right, cool. All right.
Great.
1 for 2.
Nicely done. All right, question 3.
Where is the TSMC building being built in the U.S.?
TSMC is a competitor of NVIDIA. He mentioned it earlier.
Yeah. Virginia?
Well, you got it.
Is that your
in
final
the US,
answer?
right?
Do what?
It's in the U.S., so you got that part right.
Okay.
But you're a little off.
Yeah, I'm trying to... Man, that light going off is very distracting.
Oh, yeah. Blame it on the light.
It's not
That
that
one's
this
in,
wasn't interesting.
That one's in Phoenix. $65 billion investment. Ugh.
Okay. Oh, 65 billion. Okay.
I'm surprised you didn't get that one.
Yeah.
Those kind of details don't normally escape you.
I know that it was with, yeah. It
I
is
was throwing a lot of facts out there at one time, though.
a lot of facts, yeah. And I've been looking at like
even
4 different tabs.
Yeah.
And the light-
You
but
you
it's
are
okay.
doing a lot over there. That's true.
But yeah, anyway, good. These are good questions.
Okay, let's go to question 4. Which you are also going to get wrong
Okay.
because we did not talk about this.
Okay.
So we're just going to see if you can think your way through it.
Okay, let's do it.
Okay. Explain to me what an intermodal facility is.
Whoa. Intermodal.
What is an intermodal facility?
Okay, well, modal makes me think of motors or like transportation or moving stuff.
Or
So-
maybe modes instead of motor, but yeah.
Oh yeah, different modes, intermodal. Okay, there's different modes, different types of, it's a building in which you can switch what you do in it from, maybe you got some office here and in the back.
Let me
you can-
stop you right there because I like how you're thinking. I'm going
Yeah.
to give you a little nudge.
Okay.
And see if it helps you here. Don't think about the inside of the building. Think about the outside of the building.
Oh. Signage. There's a couple. Oh, it could be turned into something else from the outside. Transformer. It's a building that you can drive like a car on Wednesdays.
You're so close, but I'm going to put you out of your misery.
Okay,
here, 'cause
please.
You actually said it,
I did.
but it's not what you were talking about.
Oh, okay.
An intermodal facility is a facility that is linked to different, at least 2 types of transportation.
Oh.
Rail, highway,
I see.
water.
I see.
You can float out of there. You can stick it on a train. You can, so it at least has two modes of transportation.
I see.
That it's linked to. So that's an intermodal. It can be manufacturing. It can be warehouse distribution space. It can be, but if it's intermodal, it has at least two types.
Two types of, yeah. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. That is good. That's a good question. Good question.
All right. Question 5.
I get the last one. So I'm going to open-ended question. And how many podcasts did you say you guys have done? 75?
This one might be the 75th one once it's published.
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah.
I believe so.
So question for you, Tim, in 75 episodes, as someone that didn't come with a background on commercial real estate experience, is what stood out to you out of those 75 episodes that you've done as being particularly noteworthy?
What a great question.
That's a great question.
You can't get it wrong, and I can't wait to hear the answer.
Yeah. There's so much. I think the amount of, there's a couple things that stand out. One of them comes from Jim Rosen. And one thing that stood out from that was the amount of artistry that can come into this. The amount of creativity that you have when you're putting together a deal or negotiating or figuring things out. That's one thing. Number two is how much knowledge of the data you have to have. Like knowing everything inside and out, just like what you were saying, Chad, on industrial. And again, like just seeing the example of Bob Knackel answer the question, how's the market? And knowing it, and the footwork of walking around New York City during COVID and taking that opportunity to do something he always wanted to do, the level of data that has upped his game from being the best to being better than he was, right? So that, and then more recently, how many commercial real estate professionals live on X?
Oh yeah,
Seeing
Timmy
that-
has just described, what's the word?
Discovered.
Discovered the CRE industry on X.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like the rest of us have known that for a while, but
Right.
like it's so engaged.
Right.
And people share all kinds of great stuff.
That's right. Yeah.
You know, it's a, you know,
Yeah.
and I do not enjoy social media, but that's the exception. If I spend any time on social media, it's going to be on X
Yeah.
with market experts and sector experts like Chad Griffiths
Yes.
and the
That's
others.
true.
It's a great engaging place.
But if I had to say it, boil it down to one thing, Chad, it's the appreciation I have gained for what my dad and now my brother does. Like their whole career, I had no idea. And that was one of the biggest reasons why I wanted to do this with Bo. We grew up and dad was in the business, but work was at work. And when he was home, he was home.
Yep.
So I didn't know anything of what it was or what he did. And to understand everything that goes into it behind the curtain, every little thing I learn, and it happens almost every episode, where I learn a new aspect of what is going into it. From the episode on my market cycles and understanding market cycles to underwriting a property and everything that goes into underwriting a property and deals that can be made, and from how you get money for your first, understanding debt in a new way I've never understood before. It's hard to choose just one, but I'd say the biggest thing that stands out to me is what Bo and my dad did, but what Bo does. And just really being able to have a conversation with my dad finally about something that he likes and not me, not just what I like.
That really threw me off, man. I was like, are you really choking up right now?
No,
You
that's
know? I was
acting.
like,
Yeah, no.
it was pretty good acting.
Oh, yeah. Well, I had a lot to pull from with really appreciating what you all do now. But, yeah.
Well, thanks.
That's a really cool answer. And I think that's what makes the format of your guys' show so cool. And I'm a big fan, as I mentioned at the beginning, and I I think you guys are on the cusp of creating the best commercial real estate podcast, because you have that dynamic of Bo being recognized expert in the field, with you being a funny dude and having a genuine interest in learning about this stuff.
Yeah.
The banter you guys have back and forth is awesome. You've got a big fan in me, so I can't wait to see you guys explode this podcast and take it to number one.
Thanks, Chad.
Thanks, Chad.
Thank you so much. Well, Chad, let all of our listeners know where they can find you.
Well, if you search anything industrial real estate on social media, I probably will come up first, because I've just talked about it the most.
Yeah.
Whether I've had intelligent things to say or not, I've just talked the most about it and shown what a big nerd I am on it. So search anything on industrial real estate. YouTube channels where I produce the most content, but I spend the most time on Twitter. So either one of those are great. Twitter or YouTube are great spots.
And your YouTube channel is called Industrialize?
Industrialize. Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
Yeah, and your podcast is it the same?
No, I was very creative coming up with a show about industrial real estate, and I called it the Industrial Real Estate Show. Which
That's the way to do it.
There's a lot of effort and brain power that went into coming up with that doozy.
Hey, one of my favorite bands is Dave Matthews Band. So,
oh, beauty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, keeping it simple, there's a lot of wisdom to that. Like,
That's true.
when somebody searches to find an industrial real estate podcast, guess who's naturally the first one?
That's right.
I mean, that's
right.
a lot of brilliance there. So.
Yeah. And I can say, just from watching your ex the past few days, anybody interested in industrial, you could just start there and then move on. And you can
question.
Yeah. It's not evident how passionate this man is.
I will also plug this. Your podcast is fantastic, and even if you're not an industrial specialist or just as passionate about, he also has guests who will talk about prospecting, other things, like they're tangential to industrial real estate, but you can listen to a lot of his shows and take that information and go apply it to another asset class, to another part of the business. And so you don't just have to be an industrial junkie to want to watch Chad's show. So it's or listen. So there's a lot of value there in every episode. So
it's true.
Yeah. Thanks for that. I appreciate that.
You got it, man.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, Chad, this is great.
Awesome.
This is great.
That was awesome. Loved it. I could continue this conversation for another hour. I look forward to having you guys on my show as well, so where we can continue that conversation for another hour. So
yeah, we're looking forward to it.
Absolute honor. I'm glad I dressed up for the occasion.
So
you guys are true professionals. I love everything you guys are doing. Big fan.
Well, likewise, man.
Yeah, back
Thank
at
you so much.
Thanks, Chad.
Awesome, fellas.
Oh, wait, don't leave yet. Don't leave yet.
Oh, what you got?
I just noticed here, Nick Ihorn, our friend from
Nick,
Texas. He says, did you guys cover how Chad is the king of X? And Chad is pretty good. Chad is a pretty good guy. Hard to believe he's Canadian. So, yeah. That's what Nick added to our episode. So thank you, Nick, for
yes, thank you, Nick. And then on LinkedIn, too, we've got Rafael Coyazzo. Yep. He goes, love it. An all-star group of CRE pros.
Man, we should have Rafael. Have you had Rafael? Yeah,
I have. Rafael's a great guy.
Yeah, he's fantastic. Yep.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Sweet.
We're good to go.
All right. We'll talk to you soon.
You can leave now. We won't hold you up any longer, but we'll talk again soon.
Looking forward to it. Thanks again, guys.
Yeah.
All right, man.
Bye, Chad.
Take care.
That was great. Well, anybody listening right now, if you're on YouTube, hit subscribe, ding that little bell so you're notified every time we go live. If you're on X, consider following us as well. Any social media channel you're on, if you're not already subscribed and talking to us, please do. We've got a free weekly newsletter that comes out every single Thursday. In that, you'll get the most latest podcast episode, and as well as several curated articles that Bo consumes himself: negotiation, business, leading a team, as well as commercial real estate things. And yes, it's completely free. You can sign up at subscribe.wgbaron.com. to fill your head with what my brother fills his head with, and what makes him such an inspiration to me.
That's so very nice.
Yeah.
We do have one shout out at least that I want to mention, because we have a new review on Apple Podcasts.
Oh, I was trying to pull it up and I couldn't. Awesome.
I got it. Yeah. This is
if you are on Apple, if you go to Apple Podcasts, click our name. It'll take you to our page. Scroll down past a few episodes. You will see the reviews, and that's where you can leave a review. If you go through that effort of doing that, where it's kind of hidden down there, we will shout out every single Apple review we get. We love them, and the ones that are coming in fast. And what's this latest one here?
And they really help out the show. Like, it's a great way to return the favor. If you get any value out of the show, it's a great way to help us continue to grow the show. The reviews really, really help. So this is from Nick E. Lane. Says, love these guys, always learning something new and laughing along the way.
That's right.
Which is exactly what we want to hear. So thanks, Nick, for taking the time to leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. We really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nick. Next on Monday, the episode that's coming out on Monday, I'm going to switch over to there we go.
Hey.
Episode coming out on Monday is going to be a good one. We're talking to one of the founding board members of the DEI of or the CCIM DEI
in Tennessee.
In Tennessee.
Right?
Yep.
And he's a scholarship recipient. He's a good buddy of mine. And
we talk about that. Yeah, and we talk about cannabis industry as well. We go into that a lot because he has his hands in that as well.
And he's been a unique guest for us because he's got a different role in commercial real estate.
That's right.
And we'll just let him explain it when we get him on. But
so that's coming up.
He's got a little bit of a different job, which gives him a little bit of a different perspective. And I love the conversation we have about how your investment timeline, how long you plan to actually own something, really impacts the decision making on what to buy and what you can do with it the longer you hold it. So
that's right.
That was a really interesting part of the conversation, and that's coming up Monday.
That's coming up on Monday, and the week after that, we've got Rod Santo Massimo.
That's right, baby.
You can go look at the unedited live version of that right now, but that will be coming out. Massimo Con, of course, is coming up. We're huge fans of the Massimo Group, and the coach of Bob Knackle, who wouldn't want to hear from him?
That's right.
Right? And then we got a few other things lined up that we're not going to share with you just yet because I can't even think of what they are yet. But I think that's it. I love you, brother.
Love you, man.
This is so fun. Bye, Alice.
Right. Bye, Alice.
Bye.
Yay! Nice.